Sasquatch, the Abominable Snowman, the Jersey Devil, they all sound like a bunch of baloney until you're face to face with them. Those who believe in urban legends and paranormal folklore get their fair share of eye rolls, and some are admittedly deserved. But the most firmly grounded of us would quake in our boots if the things we chalked up as fantasy turned out to be the real deal. Point Pleasant, West Virginia, hadn't experienced much in the vein of the abnormal. As its name suggests, it was a small, quiet community, full of logical people who didn't dwell on the strange or unsettling. All that changed when a giant winged being swooped down from the heavens and clocked the locals with its glowing red eyes. It was November 12, 1966, when a Clendenin, West Virginia, gravedigger caught movement out of the corner of his eye. At first, he ignored it, continuing to lift his shovel. Then the dark mass whooshed by again. It wasn't a trick of the light. He turned to see what could possibly be lurking alongside him in the empty graveyard. Leaping from tree to tree with unsettling speed was a creature that looked somewhat human, but also, not quite. Cloaked in the shadows, the gravedigger stood rooted in fear of the uncertainty. He was the first, though hardly the last, to witness the strange creature, which he described as a brown human being. Only 3 days later, two young couples were parked in a secluded lover's lane. All semblance of romance vanished when both couples spotted a huge gray being presenting itself just out of reach of the car's headlights. Roger Scarberry and Steve Mallet gave quotes to the Point Pleasant Register, describing the blazing red eyes that had to be at least 6 inches apart. They noted the creature's wingspan was around 10 feet. It shied away from the light cast by the car's high beams. When they attempted to flee, the winged being gave chase, matching the highest speeds of the car's odometer. To those who'd questioned their sanity, Roger noted, "If I had seen it while by myself, I wouldn't have said anything, but there were 4 of us who saw it." The creature was christened with a name that embodied all its mysterious characteristics: hulking gray wings, nighttime appearances, undeniably human features, massive glowing eyes. They called it the Mothman. Soon, sightings were happening all over the place. At first, locals joked over the headlines. As the number of documented sightings increased, the public stopped laughing. Reporting in the Gettysburg Times chronicled 8 separate witness accounts of Mothman sightings. Even 2 respected volunteer firefighters spotted the creature. A man named Merle Newell Partridge experienced one of the most troubling encounters. At his home in Salem, WV, Merle was kicking back watching TV when the screen started zigzagging with a weird pattern, which was followed by a high-pitched tone. His dog Bandit started howling in the direction of the shed. Merle grabbed his gun and stepped onto the porch, but saw nobody around. What he did see were 2 big red lights, resembling bike reflectors, that he knew were a pair of eyes. Before Merle could stop him, Bandit bounded towards the woods, headed directly toward those glowing red lights. He never returned. In the weeks that followed, Merle scoured the surrounding wilderness, but his beloved dog was gone. Still, not everyone was convinced. Dr. Robert L. Smith, an associate professor at West Virginia University whose expertise was in wildlife biology, felt strongly that all the eyewitnesses were crying monster. All they'd actually spotted was a sandhill crane. The crane theory checked many boxes. First off, they're pretty massive, reaching a max height of 5 feet tall. Dr. Smith suggested the red-eyed detail repeated by the witnesses had to be the crane's distinct red patches surrounding its eyes. Given that most of the statements described at least a 10-foot wingspan, this ruled out the sandhill crane. Others suggested the bird could be mutated by suspected radioactive remnants from World War II bunkers neighboring a wildlife preserve. Most believed in the Mothman. There's always the possibility that the Mothman was a big hoax. People hypothesized a prankster was behind some of the sightings, which generated a slew of false reports. Flashlights pointed into any animal's eyes would reproduce a red-eye effect. In the year that followed the initial sighting, the Mothman was a hot topic among West Virginians statewide. The number of sightings coincided with a spike in claims of UFO encounters. All this paranormal hype came to a head on December 15, 1967. Cars zoomed over Silver Bridge, which connected Point Pleasant and Gallipolis, Ohio, for nearly 40 years. Initially, the builders of the bridge accounted for vehicles of the time. These weighed about a third as much as the average car in the mid-60s. The strain of bumper-to-bumper wagons was too much on the frigid morning of December 15. In seconds, an eyebar on the Ohio end of the bridge snapped from the excessive weight. All the people in their cars had no time, no warning before they fell. Bystanders watched in horror as 75 cars dropped into the Ohio River. Parents attempted to free themselves and their children from the rush of the 40-degree Fahrenheit waters. Despite the first responders arriving quickly, 46 people died that day. The Silver Bridge collapse devastated the people of Point Pleasant, the same people who'd swapped Mothman theories for the past year. Naturally, these two unfathomable events rocked the town and led to the conclusion that they were potentially intertwined. Connecting the events caught on quick, spreading into the general consciousness of society beyond West Virginia. The parallels echoed in a popular book called The Mothman Prophecies by John Keel in 1975, which outlined the concept that the creature's appearance was a form of caution. John Keel's book was adapted into a movie of the same name starring Richard Gere in 2002. It hammered home the message that the winged being was a savior sent to warn people of approaching tragedy. These days, people have fun with the sci-fi legend. In 2019, the Mothman resurfaced in a wave of viral memes. Plus, every year believers from around the country, and a slew of undecided but curious fans flock to Point Pleasant for the Mothman Festival. The citizens present during the peak of the Mothman hype don't think it's such a laughing matter. A statue was erected in Point Pleasant, and a museum was opened in its honor, a tribute to the herald of the most fatal bridge collapse in U.S. history at the time. Today, people like Benjamin Radford look to the Mothman legend to help further their own research. He isn't afraid of playing with fire, literally or metaphorically. In fact, he's made a career out of tracking down the dangerous creature's urban legend. As a paranormal investigator and expert on urban legends, he utilizes a scientific approach to determine whether or not there really are things that go bump in the night. Still, he's far different from your average TV ghost hunter. Benjamin is game to scope out a haunted house, though he's not the type of investigator who will claim to find ectoplasm in every corner. He's actually skeptical that these kinds of spirits exist. Still, he was not as certain about mythical beasts. Throughout history, nearly every culture asserted the existence of some monster plaguing their people. Benjamin has at least looked into each one, but he decided to chase the beast that was basically right in his own backyard. He was after the Chupacabra, the most infamous monstrosity of the Caribbean and Central America. Its reputation has become so feared that even people in New England and Europe have claimed to see it. There's no doubt why it's so memorable. Reports disagreed about whether the demon looks more like a wolf or a reptile, but its modus operandi stayed consistent. Chupacabra literally translated to goatsucker. Tales of the Chupacabra spread as shepherds found their flocks mysteriously drained of blood overnight. This legend stayed with Benjamin since the first time he heard it as a child in New Mexico. Could there be some truth behind this fearsome predator? To get the ball rolling, the investigator contacted alleged Chupacabra witnesses. Most encounters, like a notable 1995 sighting in Puerto Rico, unfortunately didn't involve any physical evidence. Benjamin knew that relying solely on someone's memory was a dicey prospect. Fear often distorted the recollections of even the most trustworthy observer. He made an interesting connection when digging into that 1995 claim. The onlookers provided an extraterrestrial description that rung a bell in Benjamin's mind. It was a dead ringer for Syl, the alien antagonist from Species, a horror movie that debuted that same year. It seemed that, when in panic mode, the human mind filled in gaps with a familiar image. Benjamin therefore doubted that a real Chupacabra would resemble a movie villain. But the thought of a more canine monster intrigued him. For this version of the Chupacabra, the beast looked like a wolf with enlarged eyes, claws, and teeth. In biological terms, this theory held more water. Could it be that the monster was a rare mutant? This possibility had Benjamin hopping all over the Americas, visiting purported Chupacabra sites between Texas and Nicaragua. There was definitely proof that something vicious was attacking local livestock, and that was only the tip of the iceberg. In a handful of cases, unsuspecting townspeople happened upon the remains of a Chupacabra. These bodies looked like no other animal the witnesses had seen before, so hideously deformed and strangely patterned. Benjamin felt his heart race when he heard the news. When veterinarians examined the specimens, however, the results were less than thrilling. They determined most of them to be coyotes, raccoons, or Mexican hairless dogs. Still, there was a monster involved in each of these findings. Parasitic mites really did make these ordinary animals look like abominations. They caused mange, a disease that removes hair and forms scaly patches all over the skin. Still, a few believers wouldn't buy this explanation. Many had seen herds of goats decimated firsthand, with barely a single drop of blood left in their bodies. Benjamin's zoological research chalked this up to ordinary coyotes. While hunting, they often punctured blood vessels on the necks of their prey, which quickly bled out. Though disappointed not to find an actual Chupacabra, Benjamin pieced together how this legend came about. For one thing, the beast bore a striking similarity to the vampire. Besides the supernatural blood drinking, both stories explained misfortunes suffered by isolated societies. Even in our ultra-connected world, these tales persist due to entertainment and conspiracy culture. However unlikely it may be that creatures like Bigfoot and the Chupacabra actually exist, the ideas behind them are too alluring for many believers to give up. Without a shred of proof for the real Chupacabra, Benjamin asserted that the goatsucker was nothing more than a fable. That was par for the course for this professional skeptic. Still, many others won't back down from their belief of otherworldly phenomena. The Scottish Highlands are known for lush, green scenery and centuries-old castles, but what really attracts tourists has nothing to do with nature or architecture. Scotland's greatest mystery lies just beneath the surface of the vast Loch Ness. Loch Ness is over 700 feet of deep, dark water, and it's the rumored home of the mythical Loch Ness monster. A geneticist and self-described monster hunter, Professor Neil Gemmell was fascinated by the myth and believed he could be the one to get answers. But before answers could be found, Gemmell had to ask himself some key questions. How did Nessie come to be? What does it look like? What truly lives in Loch Ness' murky underwater world? Believe it or not, the existence of a larger-than-average underwater creature in Loch Ness was recorded all the way back in 500 AD. A man was swimming when he was apparently mauled and dragged underwater by a water beast. From then on, the sightings only increased. At the beginning of the 20th century, local interest in an underwater beast hit its peak. The tourism in the area was increasing, and in 1934, a vacationing man was looking out at the loch when he saw something odd, so he grabbed his camera. The ensuing picture, known as the surgeon's photograph, captured a blurry, long-necked creature peeking out of the water. Suddenly, Nessie's long neck and bumpy back was famous worldwide. This became the definitive Nessie sighting, but it also sparked years of controversy. The scientific community has always resisted the existence of the Loch Ness monster due to a lack of evidence, and it wasn't long after the surgeon's photo was published that it was exposed as a hoax. Obviously, this was a huge blow to enthusiasts everywhere. You see, back then, photographic evidence was really the only surefire way to provide evidence that something had happened. All believers had to go on were local tales and childish drawings. Thankfully, times have changed. Professor Neil Gemmell knew that even some myths should be investigated, so he decided to find out the truth once and for all, and since it's the 21st century, he was able to do a lot better than photographic evidence. Leading a team from New Zealand's University of Otago, Neil took water samples from 3 different depths of the lake. Each sample contained DNA that Neil hoped would shed some light on the murky mystery, DNA that was comprised of seemingly normal materials. Neil's team sent the DNA samples, which reportedly contained skin, scales, feathers, fur, and fecal matter, to labs in Australia, New Zealand, Denmark, and France. Neil's investigation couldn't have come at a better time, as Nessie sightings have recently reached a record high. Sightings are now at a level that were being recorded in the 1990s, said Gary Campbell, recorder of the official Loch Ness Monster Sightings Register. The internet has meant that Loch has never been more watched, and from anywhere in the world. With so many people intent on uncovering the Loch's secrets themselves, the Scottish economy rakes in millions a year thanks to Nessie. In 2019 alone, there have already been 12 people claiming to have seen the Loch Ness monster with their own eyes. One man, Richard Cobb, saw something large break through the surface of Loch Ness in late July 2019. I never believed in Nessie, but now I'm not so sure. What I saw was just weird, he said. There was something in there for sure. In June 2019, a boat skipper logged a large creature on his sonar close to one of Nessie's favorite lairs. It was a 25-foot-long object, definitely not your average fish. It was exceptionally big. I would like to think it was Nessie, he said. Hundreds of Nessie sightings have been debunked as otters, swans, and floating debris. Gemmell hopes that the results from his investigation will be undeniable, but he knows how staunchly some people believe in even the most outlandish of theories. Some people think that Nessie is really just an enormous catfish or eel, while others believe it to be a large Greenland shark. One of the more eccentric beliefs is that the monster is a slightly evolved plesiosaur that somehow avoided extinction. Fans of the mystery are craving answers. On Facebook, 18,000 people have signed up to storm Loch Ness in September 2019. They hope enough people in Loch Ness will get the creature to resurface so they can, as the group put it, find dat big boy. But Gemmell hopes that his findings will answer any questions people have before any storming ensues. We've tested each one of the main monster hypotheses and 3 of them we can probably say aren't right and one of them might be, he said mysteriously. He described his findings as significant and a bit surprising, and expects to release them in September. We're delighted with the amount of interest the project has generated, he said. Monster or not, we're going to understand Loch Ness and the life in it in a new way. While Loch Ness monster enthusiasts wait for the results of Gemmel's study, some are turning their attentions to Lake Van, the largest body of water in all of Turkey. It's also hiding a secret monster within its depths. Despite being situated over 5,000 feet above sea level, Lake Van never freezes. The lake's high salinity keeps the water flowing year-round, though this phenomenon has come at the price of Lake Van's biodiversity. Because of these high salt levels, only one type of fish, the pearl mullet, is known to live in the lake's brackish waters. However, according to local legend, these mackerel-sized fish aren't the only creatures lurking beneath the waves of Lake Van. For over a century, locals have reported sightings of a monster that calls Lake Van its home. Most of these claims have proven unfounded over the years, though in 1997, Unal Kozik managed to capture the creature on film. In the video, a large, almost squid-like monster emerges from the water before slowly disappearing beneath the waves. Yet like similar sightings of legendary creatures, the legitimacy of Kozik's discovery continues to be a point of contention among scholars. Even so, the possible existence of such a creature hasn't deterred archaeologists from exploring the lake. Just recently, in fact, an expedition led divers to the very bottom of Lake Van, though what they found there was unlike anything they'd seen before. On the day in question, a group of researchers assembled by Van Uzunku Yale University arrived at the lake shore to debunk another age-old myth, that the lost city of Atlantis was actually somewhere beneath Lake Van. Believe it or not, this idea wasn't so far-fetched. The land surrounding Lake Van was once home to the Urartians, an ancient civilization that flourished in Turkey during the Iron Age some 3,000 years ago. Yet despite their centuries-long presence in the area, very few remnants from the days of these ancient people still remain. While conquest surely played a role in the disappearance of most Urartian structures, some scholars believe the rising tides of Lake Van sunk these relics beneath the water. Locating these structures would be no easy task, however, so the team opted to bring in a little extra help. A veteran underwater photographer, Tosin Salen, was pegged to lead the expedition's dive team in search of the lost Urartian kingdom. With his years of diving experience, coupled with his extensive knowledge of Lake Van, Salen was surely the team's best bet for uncovering this long-forgotten piece of history. But when it finally came time to take the plunge into the lake, even Salen couldn't help but feel a little wary over the thought of the legend of the Lake Van monster. Sure, he'd dived here hundreds of times before, but would this be the day he finally came face to face with the terrifying creature? The team seemed to echo their guide's fears, and as they dove deeper into the lake, it became increasingly difficult to shake this unnerving thought. After all, in a body of water as large and murky as this one, almost anything could be lurking just a few feet below. Once they'd reached the bottom of Lake Van, Salen and his team quickly set to work combing the sands for any sign of Urartian artifacts. Almost instantly, one of the divers spotted an enormous shadow that made everyone's blood run cold. Shrouded in a veil of deep blue, what the diver saw sat in total stillness, almost as if it were made of stone. The divers summoned their courage and swam toward the site, but what they found wasn't a monster. It was a castle. The towering structure was in remarkable condition, its walls and foundation intact. It had certainly been down here for quite some time, but was this castle truly a relic from the long-forgotten Urartian Empire? They needed to know more. As Salen and his team continued exploring the ruins, one of the divers stumbled upon a revelatory etching on one of the walls, that of a lion. This all but confirmed the castle was Urartian, as the civilization had used symbols such as these to identify themselves as a kingdom for centuries. After snapping photos of the structure, the divers returned to the surface to share their findings with the rest of the team. The researchers were thrilled at the discovery, though upon learning of the lion symbol, things quickly became complicated. Despite the Urartians using this motif throughout their history, some of the scholars believed the lion symbol looked more medieval than ancient. If this was the case, then the castle would date back to the Middle Ages rather than the Iron Age. The structure itself also supported this theory, as the stones used to build it were a mix of both Urartian and medieval. This led scholars to deduce the kingdoms of the Middle Ages likely repurposed materials from these ancient ruins to build their own fortresses. The archaeological community remained split over the true origin of the castle beneath Lake Van. In the meantime, historians turned their attention to a new discovery made in the U.S., one that might be even more extraordinary than the lost Arturian kingdom. Beneath the calm waters of Cape Cod in Massachusetts, divers found a massive secret, one that lay hidden for hundreds of years. It would excite just about any historian, they knew. It's the wreck of the Whydah, a massive ship built to hold 150 men and several hundred tons of cargo. It went missing off the coast of New England in 1717, and many assumed it was lost forever. However, explorer Barry Clifford discovered the wreck of the Whydah in 1984, and he has been digging up artifacts from the site ever since. His exploits make him one of the greatest treasure hunters of all time. Barry has long been on the hunt for a treasure that will make him a legend. He once believed he found the remnants of the Santa Maria from Christopher Columbus's original 1492 voyage, but tests later determined it was a different vessel. The Whydah, however, was a monumental find. It was the flagship of one of history's greatest pirates, Black Sam Bellamy. This captain was known as the Robin Hood of the sea, and for good reason. For one thing, Bellamy only targeted wealthy merchants and tried to use as little violence as possible. His crew members received equal pay and respect, even those who were Native Americans or former slaves. In fact, the Whydah was originally the property of slave traders until Bellamy seized it by force and freed the captives aboard. Most famously, Bellamy pulled off the biggest heists in pirate history. Historians estimate that he plundered the modern equivalent of $120 million throughout his career. These daring exploits made Bellamy one of the most talked about pirates of his time. He rose above his criminal origins to become a bona fide folk hero. Unfortunately, Bellamy didn't have much time to enjoy his success. A massive storm sank the Whydah, claiming untold amounts of treasure and most of the crew, including Bellamy himself. Centuries later, Clifford and his colleagues have unearthed countless relics and treasures from the wreck, and they established the Whydah Pirate Museum to share Bellamy's story. Even though Clifford's team has been studying this site for decades, he still felt like they were only scratching the surface. Then, one diving mission in late 2016 changed everything. The explorers located a large chunk of debris from the Whydah that had many artifacts trapped inside of it. They hauled it up to dry land for a closer look. It presented a virtual treasure trove, with genuine coins and seafaring equipment jutting through the rough surface. But this motherlode contained one thing the scientists didn't expect to find: human bones. They came across a femur just a short distance away from what appeared to be Bellamy's pistol. Could it be the remains of the late great captain himself? Clifford knew they needed proof, so he recruited a team of forensic scientists. They extracted DNA from the bone and compared it to that of one of Bellamy's descendants in the United Kingdom. At last, the results came in. But it was not a match. This bone likely belonged to an anonymous crew member, but certainly not to Captain Bellamy. The elusive Black Sam slipped away from authorities once again. The bad news sunk Clifford's theory faster than the Whydah. Nevertheless, the bone gave researchers the chance to learn more about the typical sailor from that era. Clifford can still take pride in his ongoing excavation of the Whydah. After all, no other famous pirate ship has been studied so closely. Nobody can question his accomplishments or contributions to history. Besides, the mysteries of the Whydah are still out there in the briny deep, and Bellamy's final resting place may even surface someday. All it will take is the right person to find it.